Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, as there's been some rumors out there about the Leafs potentially going after a big-name defenseman here during this season. And it's been a kind of a rocky start for the Leafs. It's not necessarily in their record, but there's been a lot of personnel issues for this team, and thank goodness it's not locker room or attitude or things like that, but they've had a lot of injuries to their team, and maybe that lack of attrition, maybe they need a little bit of a boost or a shot in the arm in terms of some skill, specifically on that blue line. And we're going to take a look at the snake-bitten blue line here in today's video. So, the Toronto Maple Leafs, listen, there's been some reports out there, and we're going to get to that in a second, about potentially what could be happening for the Leafs in terms of potentially new additions. This is kind of an interesting report here, and they're saying on NHL Trade Rumors, he says the Toronto Maple Leafs have 3 forwards who have been linked to trades, including Wayne Simmonds, Pierre Engvall, and Alexander Kerfoot. That's not necessarily the new bit of news. That's not anything we haven't heard a lot recently. But kind of an interesting thing from Elliot Friedman, and he brings up that the Toronto Maple Leafs have expressed some interest in Frank Vatrano. Currently, he's playing with the Anaheim Ducks and just signed a pretty big ticket with that team. So it's kind of interesting to see his name already being linked elsewhere. But again, I think the Ducks are in a spot where they would like to move guys for assets if they can. And the Ducks, considering where they are in the standings, maybe Frank Vatrano just wasn't a great fit there. Now, another thing that we've been hearing a lot about is obviously the rumors about Jakob Chychrun. Jakob Chychrun is one of those guys that is always going to create some buzz. And that is definitely the case here between him and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is from Hockey Feed Instagram. Blockbuster trade in the making in Toronto. All eyes are on the Maple Leafs. And he links potentially seeing guys like a Jakob Chychrun or an Erik Karlsson potentially being on the radar for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, here's the problem. I love the idea of an Erik Karlsson trade there, and that is obviously going to create a lot of buzz. Except for the second you go on Cap Friendly and you look at the salary of Erik Karlsson, that would be extraordinarily difficult for the Leafs to actually get that deal done. Just not realistic, and especially during mid-season. It just doesn't seem like something that is really feasible. And even if you moved Alexander Kerfoot and some other contracts, it would take an awful lot to get that deal done. But that's where Jakob Chychrun's name comes into the conversation, because one of the key assets with Jakob Chychrun, despite not playing a lot of games, being injured, and that's maybe going to diminish his value a little bit, which does actually help the Leafs in this scenario, and maybe on a new environment, on a good team like the Leafs, he could actually thrive and play quite well. He's got a really good salary per season, Jakob Chychrun, and that's something that I think that Kyle Dubas and the Leafs absolutely should be exploring and taking a look at. And when you look at the Leafs right now, I mean, you look at the plethora of injuries they have. Ilya Samsonov out with a knee injury. Joseph Woll out with a shoulder injury. He's been on the injured reserve. A couple of key defensemen out of the lineup. Jordy Ben, upper body injury. TJ Brody with an oblique. Carl Dahlstrom, I believe, is a defenseman. He's got a shoulder injury. Jake Muzzin with a neck injury. Morgan Riley with a knee injury. So you're probably saying to yourself, well, who's on the Leafs blue line right now? So taking a look at that, this is where you start to say, oh, yeah, you know what, Kevin, you have an argument to say maybe we should pull the trigger. First line defensive pairing for the Toronto Maple Leafs, looking to win a Stanley Cup in a cup window. Their first defensive line pairing is Justin Holl and Mark Giordano. I'll let that sit for a minute and let you kind of just soak that in. It gets even better, though. Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren is your second pairing. Victor Mete and Mac Hollowell. Never heard of Mac Hollowell. Probably some kid that played in college last year and is getting his opportunity. So, kudos to him and Victor Mete for that matter. But, oh man, talk about a tough spot for those guys to be in on that third pair. That is not that is the Marlies' first or second pair in the AHL. Probably not the Leafs' third pairing defense right now. Probably a little bit of a, we have an issue here. And that's kind of what we're looking at. And the problem is for the Leafs, now again, I think it has something to do with the money side of it as well. But all 5 of those defensemen are on the injured reserve. Them being Jake Muzzin, TJ Brody, Morgan Riley, and Jordy Ben. And Ilya Samsonov is technically a part of that defense, but he's a goaltender. So now you're seeing Eric Shalgren and Matt Murray as your goalie tandem. And there was questions about Matt Murray's health earlier this season as well. So it could be down to Eric Shalgren if Samsonov's out for the long term. And the problem is when you start to see injuries, upper body for Ben, not that concerning. Oblique, yeah, that one's a little more concerning. We might not see TJ Brody here for 2022. Neck injury from Muzzin, again, depends on how severe, if he needs surgery, but he's on the IR. And the funny thing is, I'm looking at Hockey Reference, and they have Jake Muzzin neck injury. The Toronto Raptors placed Jake Muzzin on injured reserve. Shout out to Hockey Reference for that one. I did catch that. Morgan Riley, knee injury. Samsonov, knee injury. Again, you start talking about knee injuries and neck injuries and obliques. Those are a little bit more gruesome than just, say, an upper body or a shoulder injury. They're a little bit different. Or a finger injury, right? Those are a little bit more, can the guy walk? You know, you're kind of more concerned about that than can he move his finger to take the shot. Right, so that's kind of the difference here. The good news for the Leafs is, though, they've kind of proven to management and the fan base that, listen, we can still play. We have all these injuries. We're struggling a little bit in that regard, but they're still playing quite well. You look at the Leafs' current record, 13-5-3, second in the Atlantic Division, behind the Boston Bruins, and currently on a 3-game winning streak, winning 4 of their past 5 games. I would take that if I'm a Leafs fan, especially with all these injuries that have kind of been building up. This is the war of attrition. And right now, the Leafs are doing quite well with that. And if you ask a lot of fan bases, like the video I just did a couple minutes ago on the Flyers, they would love to be in the spot that the Leafs are in right now. And again, the Leafs haven't had a ton of injuries up front. But again, you still have to find a way to get that done. They had a big win last week against the Devils despite getting beer cans and food thrown on them. Maybe that's probably the best thing that could have happened coming out of the Rock. So those are wins that, again, those are defining wins. A big win against Pittsburgh. You have a couple of divisional matchups here before the end of the year. They play Detroit and Tampa this month. So this is an exciting stretch for the Leafs and is really kind of telling for what they're capable of this season. Because you look at their goals against, again, with that total mosh of a defense, their goals against is still 6th best in the entire National Hockey League. That is saying something. Right? And that is something that does surprise me a little bit. And the fact their goals for is 13th in the league shows maybe a little bit more of a commitment to the defensive side of the game and keeping the puck out of their own net. And look at that. The Leafs are finding some success there. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Who would you guys like to see come to the Toronto Maple Leafs? I think right now I would be a big fan of Jacob Chychrun coming over there and kind of coming into that blue line and maybe solidifying things. But with his injury history, maybe that isn't the best fit for the Leafs because, again, you already have so many defensively, again, liabilities in terms of health on the blue line. Do you want to add another liability in health on the blue line? Again, those are the decisions that Dubas is willing to take. We've seen him do it before. He did it with Matt Murray this past summer. He's done it with Jake Muzzin, who had some injuries in LA. So he's done it before. It's just a matter of, is this enough for the Leafs to say we need to make that move? And maybe they are willing to give up what the Coyotes are asking for in order to acquire a guy like Chychrun mid-season. So let me know your guys' thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.